The Slate Material Editor is a node-based interface for designing and editing shading networks, or material shader trees. Before you open up the Material Editor, you should know that by default it depends on the active production renderer. The production renderer will be invoked by the Material Editor in order to render previews or sample swatches. Also, materials and maps that are not marked as compatible with the current production renderer will be hidden within the Material Editor. So let's investigate. Let's open up the Render Setup dialog. And in the Common tab, scroll down to the bottom. Open up Assign Renderer. Here's where we can choose which renderer we want for the production renderer, for Active Shade, or the Material Editor. And by default, the Material Editor is locked to the production renderer. This little padlock is on by default. So any changes that we make to the production renderer will affect the Material Editor. So specifically, if we go into production rendering mode to the Arnold System tab, we need to have Legacy 3ds Max map support enabled in order to access all of the so-called legacy texture maps within the Material Editor. If this is turned off, then all of the old school procedural patterns such as noise and smoke and so on will be hidden in the Material Editor. We want that to be enabled. All right, we can close the Render Setup dialog and open up the Material Editor from its button on the main toolbar. We get the Slate Material Editor by default. Slate has an older cousin, which is the Compact Material Editor. I don't recommend that, but you may need to go into there on rare occasions. It's accessed from the Slate Material Editor menu. Go to the Modes menu and choose Compact Material Editor. But in this course, I'm going to use Slate almost exclusively. I'll switch the mode back over to Slate Material Editor. Slate is composed of 4 windows. The main window includes the title bar, the menu, and a row of icons, which is the Slate Toolbar. The main Slate window also includes these tabs, which are labeled View, and that's where we can see the graph of our shading network. The other 3 panels within Slate are the Material Map Browser, the Material Parameter Editor, and the Navigator. The Material Map Browser is on the left, and that's a separate window. It's not actually part of Slate, and we can drag that off and position it as a floating window. Well, we can drag it back, and we can dock it to some location by selecting one of these arrows. So I'll dock it back to the left side. The Navigator window just gives us an overview of where we are in the main graph. So just for reference, if I drag a physical material over into the view, now I've got something in that view, and the Navigator shows me the framing. That red outline indicates the shape of the view window itself. So if I change that shape, we can see that change over here. And as we navigate around with the middle mouse button, or zoom in and out with Control Alt and middle mouse button, or change the % value for the zoom, maybe set that back to 100, we see all those changes update in the Navigator window. Well, I never really use the Navigator, so I'm actually going to close it by clicking on the little X. If I ever needed to get that back, I can find it over here in the Tools menu. I can bring back the Navigator, or I can hide it once again. To view the parameters for any shading node, double-click on its name, and it will load in the parameter editor. That's an overview of the interface of the Slate Material Editor.